Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is One Day Today. We are on episode 122. So good to have you join us. I'm really excited about our guest today, who you'll meet in a moment, Rick Davis. But just to start off, who am I? Who are you? You know, if we knew the answer to that when we were born into this world, I feel like we'd the miss our own purpose. We'd miss our own opportunity to discover that. And this is something that I feel like every episode, I feel like this is reinforced, just the seeing this and understanding it. Like, no matter where you were from, what you grew up believing, what color you are, what your gender, your sexuality, like, no matter where you're from in this world, you know, all the things that you go through, you know, are there to discover, the illusion and breaking past that illusion of, the illusion is how limited we are, that we think that we can't have the life that inspires us, that is just full of what our heart and our soul beckons for. And it's an illusion to think that we don't have the power today, right now, to discover that and to live in that and to be that. And all every guest that we've had has had it, like, it just has a story of facing and overcome something, letting go of who they thought they were to discover who they are, and what they have uniquely that can light and lift other people up. And this is I feel like this is kind of the opportunity of right now, and being human today, because if we listen to the world, we listen to the external circumstances and thoughts and fears and feelings, we'd have every reason not to get up, and every reason not to create a world that works for everybody, to create a world where you and I can see the fullness and the depth of the universe in each other, and we see the possibility in each other. And I would assert, no matter where you're from, you have something unique that can lift others up, and you have something unique that you can offer other people that fulfills you to the core. And is that's something that we inquire on every day. And I'm really excited to have our guest with us. But first, let me welcome and say hello to our co-host, Matthew. Hey, brother.
Help survive beneath Mike. Hey, brother man, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going really
Man,
good today.
you picked something and you just kind of glossed over it. I'd like to go back and like really poke at it for a minute. The illusion. What actually is the illusion?
It cut off for a second, but I heard the question: what actually is the illusion? And
Yeah.
you know, I was thinking about that the other day. We can kind of unpack this more later, but the illusion is that we're separate. And the illusion is that I feel like on an experiential level, with our senses, that what we do and what we dream and what we take action on, that we have no power. Like, the illusion is that we are not the fullness in the space of all that is. The interconnection between all things and all people, I feel, is objective, but it's the subjective experience of finding and letting go of that illusion to really stand in what we create with our word and what we actually are committed to and what inspires us deep down.
So let's get a little bit more specific on that for a second, because yes, that is part of the illusion. But what creates the illusion? How does that even get formed in the first place? You know, and the question that I would pose to you is Abram capable of original thoughts?
Is Abram the identity, or the, the space of which Abram occupies?
So, who were you when you were born? Abram wasn't there. The idea of Abram didn't exist.
Right.
What was there when you were born? How did Abram come to be? To me, Abram is the illusion. Matthew is the illusion.
Mm.
Everything
Right.
that creates that identity is the illusion.
Right.
And how do those things get formed? Like, how does identity get formed? It happens as we're growing up. It happens as
We try to survive and get by and be safe.
exactly, or like and what is that? What exactly is that personality made of? For the most part, it really seems to be fears, desires, beliefs, and traumas. Like those seem to be the four major things that make up that illusion, that identity. And we take them on as kids as we grow up. Like one example is, say you're like 2 or 3 years old and somebody comes over to the house that like doesn't feel good. Like in your body, and you feel like, no, this is not someone I want to be around right now. And they come up and they ask for a hug, and you're like, no. But mom and dad say, oh no, that's just so and so. It's fine. You can give them a hug. Instantly, right there, part of the illusion gets formed. Because now mom and dad are saying it's okay. And mom and dad you trust, like that's kind of that link, that biological link, that emotional, spiritual, energetic link. They're saying it's okay. So is this feeling that I'm feeling about this person, is this really accurate? It must not be. And now all of a sudden there's illusion. And we grow up and we forget about that experience. And we forget how to actually feel what we felt when we were younger.
Yeah, we carry those reactions throughout the rest of our lives, just based out of almost avoiding the pain that it would come from confronting that illusion. It's a lot easier just to be like, oh, what can I do? That's how I feel. That's how I react.
It's almost like it's almost scary to admit that, like, looking back, most of my life was not me. Like, it was this thing that had been made up, and I chased a lot of things and created a lot of pain for myself because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That was how it worked.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way.
It's true. Well, so that reminds me, I want to ask you a question on this, but that reminds me of the saying I've said a lot, which is, as humans, we're born sitting down, but we have to fall flat on our face before we can stand up. And my question to you is, do you think that it's required to go through that journey of that illusion in order to break through it?
Required, no. Helpful in many, many cases, yes. Like, I've met people who just knew. Like, they just knew that they knew that they knew, and there was no breaking that connection, that knowledge, no matter how much trauma was inflicted on them as a kid. And they're amazing. Like, they're an absolute source of just pure wisdom and resonance. But for those of us who do go through that journey of forgetting, of losing our connection, like, my journey of reconnecting with that and still, like, growing with it has been one of the most profoundly enjoyable experiences of my life. Once I got used to, or once I reframed my relationship with pain, let's put it that way. Like, once I actually learned to recognize pain as a teacher and not try to run from it and avoid it and be scared of it, and actually embrace it and use it and learn from it, that changed everything. And now, like, it is a joy to, like, jump into those challenges and to be triggered and to, like, get really emotional and be scared and be angry and be frustrated and be, like, like, because those are opportunities to recognize where the illusion has been created.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
If that emotion comes up, it's almost certainly because I'm believing something that I learned as a kid that I still identify with, that I still think is real for whatever reason.
Totally. And those are the opportunities, and I think that's kind of a paradigm shift, to be able to see those struggles, the times we have pain, the times we're afraid, the times we're scared or sad. Those are our opportunities to really break down those barriers of what's happening, what life's happening, to us versus is happening for us or through us.
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience. And I think you can read every book in the world and not really get it, and know that intellectually, but not actually get it. And I think that's where, that's a choice to, like, really, like our guest last week, Kevin, he had lost his wife, and he chooses every day to wake up with gratitude, you know, and gratitude for his wife, but also for his ex-wife, because he never would have found his wife that passed if he hadn't gone through the struggle. So he's like, it's like the gratitude of the struggle is, and it seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But that's the opportunity of really, like, whatever we're facing is exactly, if we actually consider that, like, this is exactly, even as painful or scary as it feels, like, this is exactly what I need right now to get to where I'm going, and to actually look for what's on the other side of that pain and the other side of that fear. And I think that's what takes courage, and I feel like that's the common theme for all of our guests. Found a way to face that fear in their own way, based on their experiences and their circumstances.
Yeah. I can't even begin to count how many times I have been through a very like painful experience of some type, only to like get to the other side of it, and a week or two later face another experience that would not have made sense, or I would not have been capable of facing, or like I would have broken down in some way if it hadn't been for what had happened the week or two before. And it's like it just over and over and over and over and over again. It started becoming funny after a while.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true, and I think that's and that comes with a recognition, and I think that it takes courage, but it's like, but really acknowledging and seeing that the most beautiful things in our life are outside of our comfort zone, are on the other side of our fears, and seeing fear as an access to love.
Yeah, fear is a friend. It's a guide. It's a teacher.
It's so counterintuitive. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be like, I could hear, like, you know, even my own mind, like, I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to struggle. And it's like, it takes courage to actually consider that and to look at that for ourselves each and every day.
It does. And I honor every single person who's come on here and has just shared that with the world, bold face. And I'm looking forward to hear what Rick says. So I think it might be time. Let's just bring it on.
I think it's time. All right. Please welcome to the stage, everybody, with us, Rick Davis.
Hi, Abram.
Aloha.
Matthew.
Hi.
Aloha.
Welcome,
How's
Rick.
it going?
Thank you for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It was interesting listening to the discussion that both of you had there. I had so many thoughts that were going through my mind.
I mean, if you just want to riff on it and go for it, like just throw it out there.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. I know you had asked me to tell everybody who I am, but before I forget, you're talking, about the illusion. And Abram, you had said the illusion is that we don't have any power. And I immediately thought of, when people say, I don't have any power, what do they become? Well, they become a victim, and then it's everybody else's fault, and they go through, life, that way. And then, I think, Matthew, you talked about falling flat on your face. I instantly thought of a book that John Maxwell has written that I have on my shelf over here called Failing Forward. And so where are we going with that? And then to encapsulate the conversation that both of you were having prior to bringing me on, that really ties in well, if I may, with my book here, put it that way, The Furnace of Leadership Development. And later on, I can tell you about a story that I have in here regarding a glass paperweight and how that was formed, in that furnace.
I love the imagery of a furnace, because it's so, it is feeding a fire, to really, and that's where it takes something. Because I feel like, I feel like there's always an option to just not show up, is to be powerless, to just sit on the couch, drink beer and eat Cheetos, until we die. And there's no and I mean, we could be justified in doing that. Yeah, there's scary things in the world, so I'm just going to be on my couch. You enjoy it, but it's like, it is a furnace because it is a choice to fill it with the fuel. And I feel like all our circumstances, all the challenges are what we feed that furnace with. And it's like, and I feel like when we find flow, it's like, or find that experience of our own freedom, it comes from the choice to transmute the things that are scary, the things that are hard, the things that are difficult, and channel that into something beautiful. And I think that in that way, we are gardeners of our life and of the experiences we have in our lives.
Yeah. So, would you like me to share then something about myself and some of that background?
Please, yes,
Okay. All right. Well,
yes. You're ready,
I'm living
Rick.
in
The stage is yours.
Okay. Well, I'm living in Colorado now, but I'm originally from New Jersey. Grew up in Cumberland County, New Jersey, near the Delaware Bay. And I've been out here in Colorado this time around coming up on 35 years, and that'll be same anniversary for me and my wife. We have two adult daughters that are married, and we're very blessed that they both live within 10 minutes of us here. And so, growing up in New Jersey, listening to what you guys were saying before, in New Jersey is a tough state. It really can be a dog eat dog world. And, if you don't stand up for yourself, you're going to get run over. I spent time in the military, Air Force, and the Marine Corps both, and I spent a total of 37 years in the fire service. And I'll come back in and I'll fill in some details because Matthew and I were talking about trauma prior to coming on today. When I was 3 years old, I had my first ride on a fire engine. My Aunt Phyllis and Uncle Cliff, who lived next door to us, my Aunt Phyllis worked with a fellow who was a volunteer fireman, and he was sending stuff home with her all the time to give to me. When I was 4 years old, there was a large fire in a small town down there, the Delaware Bay. And every time the trucks would come, because you could hear them, my dad would take me out front, and we'd watch the trucks go by, and I'd wave. That's in the days when we still rode on the tailboard. And after that, my dad gave me his badge. He had been a volunteer fireman in Cumberland County also, and I still have that badge in a shadow box upstairs, in our house. And one of the things you talked about, trauma and hardships, is my dad had a bad heart. And, medicine back then is not quite the same as it is now. And matter of fact, I believe that, I was an EMT when I was on the job. I believe that we actually do more many times out in the street than what was taking place in the emergency rooms back in the 60s. My dad had his first heart attack when he was 36 years old, and they had him sit in the emergency room. It was in February, snow. He had to climb over snow banks, get in the ER, and nurse asked him what's wrong, and he said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." And she said, "You're too young to have a heart attack. Go take a seat." And he sat out there for a couple hours, and there wasn't even anybody in the waiting room. And the doctor came out, and he heard him say, "What's this guy's problem?" Said, "Well, he thinks he's having a heart attack." He said, "Well, get him in here." Well, he was having a heart attack, and he had a total of 5, and the 5th one was the final one. And that's when I found him. I was 14 years old and going to school. And I remember, these are things that you remember very, very clearly. It was March, and the sky was clear that day, which really, in a state like New Jersey, where you have a lot of humidity, you get haze. But that day, the sky was crystal blue and clear. It was warm. And my dad wasn't working. Back then, they put heart patients on, permanent disability. My mom was working in the glass factories. And so went off to school. I had a younger brother. And we both went off to school, walked to school. And I wasn't a big fan of school back then. So as soon as the last bell rang, I'd bolt home. I mean, I would run home. Came through the back door, and there he was. My dad was laying on the floor. Refrigerator door was open. It was obvious that he had been cleaning out the refrigerator, and he was blue. Went and got my neighbor, called 0. We didn't have 911 then. And my town didn't have an ambulance in the fire company. They come from another town above us. And I had wanted to be a firefighter for a long time. My dad had quit school during the Korean War to go off and join the military. And he was really, he had finished his high school degree, and he was going to night school also at Rutgers University there in Jersey. He really wanted me and my brother to go to college. And I wasn't 100% opposed to that. I'd say I was probably about 98% opposed to it because I was more interested in being a firefighter. And, prior to my dad dying, a very seminal show came out on NBC called Emergency, about Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto on Squad 51 in the Los Angeles County Fire Department. I'd watch that on Saturday nights, and I thought, this is what I want to do, for a living. But my dad, he wanted me to go to college. So after he died, and I saw them, as two volunteer firefighters, load the gurney up into the back of the ambulance, I said, so I want to do this for a living. Maybe college will come along someday, but I'm going to do this for a living. And I vowed that standing out there in the driveway of our house in New Jersey. Later on that summer, a gentleman by the name of Dennis Smith, who was a firefighter in New York City, wrote a book called Report from Engine Company 82. And I couldn't put that book down. And that cemented the idea for me that I wanted to go forward and do this. Started hanging out down at the volunteer firehouse whenever the siren went off or when I knew that it was a drill night. And, at first I think they probably thought, hey, who is this kid? Well, everybody knew who I was. It was a small town, but what's he doing here? And eventually I joined when I turned 18. And I joined the Air Force also in the delayed enlistment program. And yep, there she is. That's my wife, Debbie. We've been married 35 years. That picture, you come from New Jersey. But, going back, so I did serve in the Air Force, got in the fire department, and I got out. And then because I went to college, ran out of money. And then, my dad, his dream, actually, I could say, came true because I did go to college, but I ran out of money. That's how I wound up in the Marine Corps. And after the Marine Corps, I came out here, and Deb and I got married. I got back in the fire department, and I spent 30 years here at Loveland Fire Rescue in Colorado. So that's about it right there. So back to you guys.
Thank you, Rick, for sharing your journey. And I think I really hear that you found like a life of service, and just being just in every part of your story, how you, like, I guess one question I have is, what was it about, being a firefighter that, called you at like that deep level as it did?
Yeah, I can answer that. It looks like, did my camera lose the connection?
It did, yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know if can get that thing back or not. So I'll just go ahead and answer
Yeah, it's okay.
answer your question there, Abram. Initially, as a little boy, it certainly was the excitement of the job. The big trucks, the equipment, the idea of fighting fire, so forth and so on like that. And that stayed with me for a long time. When I actually got into it, and I felt the satisfaction of responding to an emergency and helping people. That's where it really took hold. And one of the first things that just really struck me is I remember going to a small shed fire, and the lady, she thanked us, for showing up, and it's like, wow, there's a shed, and she's thanking us, and so that kind of caught hold, Abram, and I really started to learn the deeper meaning of that public service, and that continued, when I was in the military as a firefighter. I remember sitting out in the crash truck, on the side of the runway, waiting for a B-52 to land one night that had declared an emergency. I mean, it was early, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. This is an 8-engine aircraft, but the reality of this thing struck me all of a sudden. It's like, you know what? There's like six people on board this airplane, and if this thing goes down, they could very easily die if we don't do our jobs. And so the reality of these things that was just really, striking me and driving it home, that dug in deep with me, and that sense of satisfaction with the job.
Is that something you felt when they came and got your dad?
No, there was, it's because that was such a emotionally traumatic experience. I can remember that very, very well. Uh, I knew my life, my mom's life, my brother's life was going to change. I knew he was gone. I mean, there was no CPR that was being done at that time. It was just pick him up, put him on the gurney, put him in the ambulance, take off up the street to the hospital. And so I knew it was going to change. And, I grew up in an era and around a lot of men that had served in World War One, World War Two, Korea, and Vietnam. And that, and yeah, I remember standing out there in the driveway starting to cry. Uh, and my neighbor, he said, "None of that. You're the man of the house now." And it took me a long time. I mean, I was a married adult before I realized it's like, you know, 14-year-old kid, you grow up really quick when something like that happens, but you're not the man of the house. I don't care how uh, people try to, and I don't want to say romanticize it, but to make it sound, oh, this is a really neat thing. You're the man of the house. Oh, I was a 14-year-old kid. you know, at that 14 years old, your voice is still changing. And yeah, so no, I didn't quite feel that way, Matthew. Um, it was just like, wow, where is here? What happens now? What is going to happen to us? What is going to happen to me? How are we going to live? Even though my mom was working, at a full-time job. So those are some of the emotions that were, going through me.
Yeah, I get that. And that phrase, that's such a common thing that comes up, especially for men. Is like, you got to be strong. You can't show your emotions. Oh, we lost him. Um, Abram, you want to try and message him real quick, see if you can get him back. But
Yeah, sure.
just riffing on that until Rick comes back. That's something I feel like I like. I don't know a guy who hasn't been told that.
Mm. Right.
And
Be strong.
yeah, and it comes up in like really insidious ways. Really, okay. Rick, try restarting your browser really quick. He just in the private chat, he's saying he can hear us. Yeah, try just like closing out completely and joining the stream again if you have the link. Um, it comes up in really weird ways because like it's not just men that are affected by that. It's also women. Like women get into that and they start to believe that. And I've had these really crazy experiences where like I'm dating a woman and she keeps telling me she wants me to be vulnerable and share my heart and to be emotional and to show all that stuff. But when I do, all of a sudden I get attacked. Like, and it's not a conscious thing. Like I don't feel like any of the women that this happened with, they were aware of it. Um, but like instantly they attack me because on the flip side, there's this perception that if I'm showing emotion, I'm not being strong anymore. I'm not being their safety. I'm not being their rock, and so they get scared and they attack me. And it's this really weird in and out. Well, let's see if Rick can come back in now. Can we? Well, still no camera, but can we hear you now?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on here from a technological, standpoint.
Yeah, it's kind of inevitable to have the technological breakdowns, but we'll work with it. We'll draw a little stick figure, right?
We can roll on it. So there was the question I wanted to ask you about that because you said it took a long time before you figured out that wasn't true. That no, you weren't the man of the house. You were just a kid. Like, what brought that about? How did you finally realize that?
I think I realized that after, I had been married and was having kids of my own, and being on the job as a firefighter longer and just observation of everyday life and the people in the emergencies that I responded to, and just maturity, and understanding is that, yeah, you 14 years old, you're thrust into different things without a father, but you're not running the household. You know, my mom was the one that was going off working in the glass factories, and she was working rotating shifts. You know, like this week she could be on day shift from 8 to 4, 2 days off. Next week swings 4 to 12, 2 days off, and then the following week the hoot owl shift midnight to 8, 2 days off. You know, which was was quite draining physically and mentally on her. But she was the one that was bringing in the money. She was the one that was supporting. She was a single mom, supporting two boys. And yeah, there's that great notion, like I said earlier, is that it sounds good that 14 years old you're the man of the house, but no, you're not. You know, you're still learning. You're still trying to figure out where in the world you're going. In your own life, what you're going to do. Your own struggles. I lost all desire. I never was a big fan of school anyway. A couple subjects. I loved history. I loved geography. But other than that, I wasn't a big fan of school. And so now dealing with my father's death, and essentially, hey, I was on my own. There's so many resources and places that somebody could go today to, seek out help. Um, but in 1972, if there were, I sure wasn't aware of them. And so you're trying to figure out, oh, I hate this. I got to go to school, and things like that. And my school in my town only went to 8th grade, and then we had to get on the bus and go up to another city, to go to school. So now you're going to that place like, hey, you're in this big school now. You don't even know any of these people around here. and so there was just so much that was taking place. And let's add in another element to this, okay? This is the early 70s, and where I went to high school at was a high school that was rife with racial problems. And while I was there, there was a race riot at one time in my junior year of high school. And so, there was just these
Wow.
constant factions that were, fighting each other. When I say constant factions, and I mean, you had white guys on white guys, black guys on black guys, Hispanic guys on Hispanic guys, and then all three of them groups on each other. and it's times, here we were, approximately 45 miles from Philadelphia, and we're winding up on the evening news in Philly because of the problems that we're having in our local high school. Guns showing up in football games and things like that. And now so many communities, they have a school resource officer from the local police department there. It's how it is in the city I live in now. Hey, back then, we had a police officer assigned to the school, an armed police officer. And he wasn't a school resource officer. He was there to keep things in order. And so, that's that type of environment just growing up. And it's these things that start to form you, and they mold you. Hence going back to, and I'm sorry that the technological issue to where we're just now staring at a black screen. Uh, but coming back to the book I showed earlier, The Furnace of Leadership Development, and I mentioned the glass paperweight. So my family worked a lot in the glass industry. My great grandfather was one of the original employees at a factory called Wheaton Glass in Millville, New Jersey. And in the 60s, they built a replica factory, and there's a museum there, so forth like that. Well, when we go back to visit, we love going over there. Now they call it the Wheaton Arts Center, and we love sitting there at that furnace and watching the glass artists do their work. Well, back, I can't remember exactly when it was. It's probably been 15 years or so. For Christmas one year, my wife had gotten me one of those paperweights. It's a beautiful paperweight. I mean, there's a flower inside of it, which attests to the fact that how great these people are, these artists are, that they can make a glass paperweight with a flower in it. But when you look at the process that takes place, not only with that paperweight that I have, but with the other glass work that's coming out of there, the furnace itself is running between 2,200 degrees to 2,400 degrees. And so there's rods that are in the furnace, and they gather up the glass, a glob of glass, and they bring it out. And if you can imagine that, it's glowing molten orange red, and the artist sits down at a big seat with oversized arms, and they start rolling the rod, and in their right hand they're shaping it, they're shaping the glass with either a wad of wet newspapers or a piece of wood, cherry wood generally, that's soaked in that water, and they start rolling it back and forth and shaping it. Then they got to return it to the furnace to warm it back up, maybe get a little bit more glass. And this was a process going back and forth, back and forth. To get the flour in it, they heat it up again, and then they dip that, or they stick that into the mold, and they pick up more glass, different colored glass, back to the furnace, shaping, cooling, back to the furnace. You know what? That's like our life. We get into the furnace, we're heated up and we're shaped, but then there's those times, where things cool down. Now, the important part to remember about this is if they take that glass and they put it in the furnace and it's in there too long, that glob just melts and it falls off. On the other side of that is if they are shaping it for too long and it gets too cold, that glass will shatter. That can happen in our lives too. Now, it can become so hot that we melt, or we shatter. From a leadership perspective, it's incumbent upon the leader to be able to understand where people are at and know, yeah, we need to challenge people and apply some heat, but not so much to the fact that we destroy them, we ruin them. Or on the other side of that, I've seen people who are so-called leaders, they don't do anything. They're there just for the position and the title, and the so-called prestige that comes along with it. So consequently, the people that are working for them, they're getting cold and become disgruntled and just shatter. So that's that analogy of the glass paperweight.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. And I guess I want to kind of stick with that metaphor. What power do you and I have, or how do we create an environment, you know, with a furnace for each other, like what
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, because not everyone is born a leader. I would also actually say most true leaders are not born a leader. It's actually something that happens to make that call, the calling. But like, how do we have to be? How does our environment? What can we do with our collective environment in our communities, in our schools, in our states, in our countries, in our world to create an environment of a healthy furnace that is actually empowering people to lead, what it is that their calling is.
Well, it certainly starts with us as individuals, you know, having the initiative to develop ourselves, to, want to improve. Leadership, I have in my book, there's a key principle, a key ingredient to leadership, and that's people. If we don't have people, you don't have leadership. So we have to start with ourselves and we learn. And, I'm sure both of you probably fall into this category because I think most people do is we've worked for some pretty bad people. People that, treat you, like you're a piece of crap, you know? And well, why did they do that? I've heard, well, that's because that's how I was treated. Okay, that doesn't make it right. Yeah, if you were 16 years old and you got jumped in the alley and hit over the head with a tire iron, that doesn't give you the right to go out and do it to somebody else. And so that is such a flawed philosophy, that exists out there, and unfortunately, it is there. So it starts with us. And what I tell people, that I've worked with over the years and now that I coach and I mentor is take these experiences, whether they're good or they're bad, and put them in your toolbox. Because you go to the toolbox and there's a wide variety of tools. And it depends, what you're doing. Are you building a house? that toolbox is certainly going to look different, than the mechanic down the street, who has the big upright toolbox on the wheels, and they have hundreds of tools that are in there. But these experiences become part of those tools. And when we become attuned to people, and one of the things that I like a lot about John Maxwell, I'm also a member of the Maxwell team, leadership team, is he talks about looking at people and automatically, putting a number 10 on their heads and valuing people, and keep that number 10 on their head until they do something that says, okay, you're no longer a number 10, you're now, a number 7 or so forth like that. And that certainly happens, when people violate our trust, or they do something, nefarious and things like that. Because, when somebody does violate our trust, it could be a long time to get that back. But nevertheless, coming back to the concept of valuing people. And I think that is how a lot of this gets started. We gotta take our eyeballs off of ourselves. We've got to be able to, you know, nail our flesh to a tree, and look at other people and value what they are bringing, to the picture, because everybody has got a different personality. Everybody has got a different skill set. Everybody has got differing, varying levels of education. And so that's a whole different package that individuals are bringing, regardless of what the circumstances are, whether it would be in the fire department, the police department, the military, wheat and glass, whether it's a church organization, the Red Cross, whatever. It doesn't matter. Everybody's bringing something different, and we need to create a team environment where people can cooperate with one another. But it's not easy.
It's not easy, especially because in order to be able to take our eyes off of us, we first have to really break down us. Like we have to get to know ourselves and where we fail, where we aren't capable of actually responding and we're just reacting from programming basically. And that goes back to what the illusion conversation, and there's a lot of things in there that you've brought up that kind of go all tie back to this illusion of what we think we are versus what we actually are. I wonder if you could maybe play with that for a little bit, just take it back to that illusion and kind of poke some holes in some things that maybe you've done or you've experienced because you thought that that's what was appropriate, but in reality it was a false belief or something or something that just led you there because of something that happened as a kid.
Yeah. I'll come back to growing up, there in Jersey, and certainly getting into high school, where the environment changed completely, totally, and you had to be a tough guy. If you weren't a tough guy, they're going to run all over you. When I say they, I mean the other people that think that they want to control, the bullies, of the world. And so, part of the illusion now comes into play is that, well, I'm a tough guy too. And it plays out and it adds to it, going back to the driveway, where the neighbor says, hey, none of that crying, you're the man of the house. And, these things build up, this false notion that I've got to have this tough guy persona. And then you get in the military and, that that builds on that, even more. And you keep things inside of you. And so that persona of nothing bothers me. Well, that's what everybody on the outside thinks. Nothing bothers Davis, but they don't see the inside. They didn't see the inside that, you know, as you respond, because we responded to medical calls, and they don't see the inside when you show up to the call. We used to like to say, we came, we saw, we conquered, we left. Okay, that's the end of it, right? Yeah, go back to the firehouse, move on to the next thing. Whether you need to go back, you're cleaning the building, you're training, or it might be mealtime. It's all done, it's all over with, right? And that caught up with me. and it caught up with me in a training class. And I had run from a period like 1 year from September through January, and the following year, I had responded to 12 cardiac arrests, and all 12 of them were at the approximate age as my dad when I had found him on the floor. And out of all 12 of them, and I didn't find this out until 2 or 3 years later, out of the 12, only one of those had survived. So I was carrying this crap with me, right? On the outside, hey, look, and here's firemen, man, we can tell you what, we can really beat up on each other. I got a nickname, Dr. Death. And some of the more senior guys, if I wound up working an overtime shift with them, it was like, oh no, I'm working with Dr. Death. What's going to happen today? You're very suspicious, so you start carrying that crap around with you. And so we got all this short period of time, 12 cardiac arrests, men, they were all men, approximate age of my dad. And so where it really started to come up is we had a training, and it was conducted by one of the police chaplains. And he was talking about dealing with, the trauma that we see on the job. And I'll tell you, Matthew, you live in there in Hawaii where there's volcanoes. That's where the rumbling started with me, and I really started to struggle. My mother-in-law was working at hospice at the time, and she said, we have a grief counselor. Her name's Nancy. You ought to go see her. I said, hey, no way. There's no way I'm doing that. Why? Hey, I got this tough guy persona. I'm a firefighter, right? I was in the military, 2 branches, Air Force and Marine Corps. I'm not going to go see any counselor. And so my wife kept talking to me about it. And it got to the point that after one shift, I was just really emotional. And my wife said, Rick, you need to go talk to Nancy. And I said, okay, one condition. You're going with me. here I am. You can imagine this. At that time, I'm in my 30s. I'm acting like I'm going to, go to the council. I'm taking mom with me, right? I mean, how ridiculous is that? But she went with me, and I sat down with Nancy, and she at the hospice, and she was very good. She was drawing things out of me. Second session, she said, I want you to do something, Rick. I want you, before we meet next time, to write a letter to your dad and tell him what it was like for you when you came in the house and you found him, what it felt like for you, what happened afterwards, how it was in high school, how it was when you joined the service, all the way up to right now that you're in the fire department, you're married. At that time, I only had my one daughter. My second one hadn't come along. So I want you to write all that out. And I'm telling you guys, that was an emotional experience. That was very, very emotional. And so that following week, we went in, and I thought, okay, this is done. No, it wasn't. Nancy said, all right, Rick, it's time for you to read this. And I'll tell you guys, that was hard. And I read it. I was crying. And she said, she took the trash can. Oh, I wish the camera was working here. She took the trash can and she sat it in front of me, and she said, all right, tear up the letter and put it in the trash can. And I did that. And as simple and maybe crazy as that sounds, that was so helpful to me. I mean, there was such a release there that from that time period, and I won't say that other calls didn't bother me. They did. If somebody is in a fire department or police department, EMS, and they say that stuff doesn't bother them, well, they're either soulless or they're a bunch of liars. But I never again had any issues responding on any cardiac arrest with male. My dad was 41 when he died, so I never again had any issues, responding on a cardiac arrest with a male in that category. Was it sad? Yeah, sure. But it did not have the same emotional impact on me. But that's part of that furnace, that I was talking about, that mold. So back to you guys.
Oh, we lost you for a second.
Cut out for half a second.
Okay.
But you were bringing it back to the furnace and how all these things shape us, and I like I get that, and I feel like this is something that we we strive to put out through the nonprofit and the show is it's okay. Like whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, it's okay, and it's okay to share it, and it's okay to like
Hmm.
let that out. However that looks like, whether you're screaming, running across naked across the room, or you're blubbering in bed, like with a pillow, like however that emotion needs to be shown, it's okay. And that act, like that simple act of just tearing up that letter, I I feel like I understand what makes it so powerful, and it's the act of ceremony, and it's something that we don't really have in our culture anymore. I've had to go experience that in other cultures, and in Native American tribes, and in Indian tribes, and in Peru and places like that, and understanding just how powerful our will is, and that by just acknowledging something can often take the sting away. And then to acknowledge it and to physically throw it away, to say, okay, I'm done with this. I've learned the lesson. I understand, is even more powerful.
Yeah, like got complete on that. Yeah, I mean, as you were even just sharing about it, Rick, just like the process, like I could just imagine, I could feel the weight, just lift and dissipate, and how that is how, and I really hear that's how you've operated in your growth and in your life since then, is feeding that furnace, and you know like you're saying about like the tough guy thing, that that is so embedded in our culture, you know and it's like how you don't even have a thing about being vulnerable now. It's like it's so like second nature, and it's like it's so counterintuitive to be vulnerable. It feels
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
like I feel like in our psyche, in our minds, just based on our own, well, this evolutionary survival, like vulnerability or just sharing openly, our brains treat that the same as like if a lion was attacking us. It's
Mm.
like we like our ego and our identity is so afraid of exposing ourselves, because it's like that means we're not safe. And it's like we're like almost like genetically like designed to not be vulnerable. And it takes like actually seeing that illusion. What I love is that you've not only created that for yourself, but you fed that furnace, and you've built your life around giving that to others, and to really create the life of overcoming that which has been in the way. And when you actually got complete with that letter that you wrote to your dad, it's just like I can just hear it in everything that you are, and that you're who you're being now, and it's inspiring. So I really appreciate you sharing it.
You're welcome. And I've been able to. Obviously, I'm not a counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, anything like that. Um, yeah, I do coaching, but I was able to share that same story with a few people in the fire department who were struggling. There was another gentleman that had worked for me at one point. I retired out as a battalion chief, a shift commander, and he had lost his father at about the same age that I did, and he was struggling and was at his station one day. And I just, hey, if I may, let me share this with you. And I shared that same story that I did with you guys here just a couple minutes
Rick,
ago.
I think you cut out.
Okay.
It's just
Can can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm wondering if Abram's audio cut out. Keep going. You're good. I'll
Yeah,
text him.
he froze up on my screen. But at any rate, I shared that with him, and he said, "Okay." A couple shifts later, he said, "Hey, you know what, Rick? I did that." And he said it was such an emotional experience for me. And he's, I can't believe how much that helped. And so it's like, wow, that, that's cool, that it helped out like that. Fortunately, I'll say this about the fire service is it has progressed to where there's a, so many more resources now than what there was when I first came on the job. That people who are doing it, there's peer support groups. We had a staff psychologist, that we shared with the police department, and we could set up appointments, with her, and go talk to her if we needed to. But I had my last couple of years, in the department. I have people say, "How in the world have you made it so long on the job?" And I said, "Well," I said, "first of all, it's the grace of God that has helped me along." I said, "Second of all," I says, "I got a wife that supports me and daughters that support me." And I said, "Number three is," I said, "we got to realize, fellows that and girls, that even though this is a great career, it's still a job. It's still a job, and we're not. And if you're married to this job, you're in trouble, And there's a life after this, unless you get killed on the job, which hopefully, thank God, I could tell you guys, one of my goals as a battalion chief is I wanted to be able to finish my career and not see anybody under my command killed in the line of duty or suffer a career-ending injury. And that did not happen. There were some injuries, yeah, but nothing career-ending. And so, because I never wanted to have to go off, in the retirement into what I'm doing now, having that hang over me. But I said, you got to take care of yourselves, and that doesn't just apply, to people who are in the fire department. That applies to any of us. We have to take care of ourselves, and we have to have the right perspective and have the correct priorities in life, and then that's going to, I believe, extend our lives. And it's not going to, it's like Matthew, you said, running around the room naked, screaming, maybe we can prevent that.
I well, I think that like back to like your furnace metaphor. I think it's such a perfect, appropriate metaphor for you in how you've shared and how you've discovered that for yourself and how you've given that to others, especially because you've been a firefighter. It's just like because a fire, and by definition, will burn everything around it if you don't control it. And the fact that how you channel that into a furnace is such a beautiful transmutation or transformation of energy. How just like you were saying earlier, how when the glass blowing, like it can either shatter or it can melt off. And I think it's so appropriate to like channel the fire or the challenges, the chaos of the world into your own metaphorical furnace. And it's just like how, and I see that's what you've done literally in just how you share your journey, and but also what you're giving others in empowering them and giving them access to their own leadership. So I just acknowledge you for bringing the fire. And
Well, thank you. Well, as I've gone through life, I don't believe in the concept of retirement that a lot of people hold. You finish a career and then that's it. You sit around, you go fishing, and so forth and so on like that. I believe we all have things to contribute to others. And I believe that I have a responsibility and a duty, which duty is one of my core values as well, is to help the people that are around us and teach and pass on to the people who are coming up behind us the lessons that we have learned, and perhaps they can avoid some of the same mistakes. I'll tell you guys, I've done some pretty stupid things in my life, and if I can help somebody else, and help them to avoid that, then, hey, that's success.
yeah,
And it's not just helping them avoid that; it's actually allowing them to springboard and to discover
Yeah.
even like new places that humanity hasn't been before, that we haven't been before.
Yep.
Um, I have a really good friend. He has this thing. He says everything is Star Wars, and the more like the more I play with a lot of the stuff that we talk about here on the stage, and the more I play like in my own realm with my own ceremonies, my own energy practices and things like that, the more I'm starting to agree with him. And I have to say there's like, because what you're saying is just this absolutely beautiful quote by Yoda in one of the newer Star Wars movies. Um, Masters are those they learn to grow beyond.
Hmm. Interesting.
And I just really want to say thank you for one being here and just being able to share this, but two for actually taking on those experiences as a human being and in a time when tools really weren't available like we have today. Like I, I feel like we're so fortunate right now with the communication tools we have and the ability we have to disseminate knowledge and to absorb knowledge
Google.
and to share knowledge. Yeah, like Google, YouTube, Twitter, like all of those things. Like there are so many things that, like, if I did not have access to those resources, I feel like I would have been a lot more traumatized by certain events than I actually was. Um, but I've had people like you who are sharing their knowledge on platforms like that, and I've been able to take that knowledge and take that experience and jump off of it and like find even more like amazing things that a lot of those people never even considered. And now I'm getting to go back and go, okay, well, like let's play with this, let's play with this, let's play with this, and they're like, oh, okay, didn't even think about that, and then we get to play with each other in that way.
It's
But
so
yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. I don't know what happened here with the camera. I'll have to troubleshoot that one.
It's okay. We'll figure it out and get you back next time. Real quick though, there is one more thing I wanted to dive into before Abram actually closes it out. You said, going back to that story you shared about the EMTs, and like if they claim they're not affected by the job, they're either crazy or they're lying. There is a third option. They've made friends with death, and they've made friends with pain, and they understand its place.
Huh, that's an interesting idea. You know,
There's something there's something I've been playing with for the last 2 or 3 months now. Because I've faced my own death many times. Like I have actually died twice, no, 3 times in my life, and I've had many, many, many near death experiences. And I've worked with a lot of people who have had really traumatic losses in their life. I mean, you with your dad. There's a woman I interviewed about a year or so ago who lost her son to an opioid overdose when he was 18. A lot of my friends who've died of cancer or lost someone to cancer, car accidents, all kinds of things like that. And what I feel like, if there's one thing that I can say is true about this world, it's that we all come here to die. And the question is, how are we going to die? Are we going to die with a life well lived and well loved that we can look back on and go, yeah, I lived and I enjoyed my time here? Or are we going to die scared and alone and angry and frustrated because we weren't authentic every single moment of every single day?
yeah, yeah. That latter one's a life of regret, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
And as
sad
far
that there are people that you know they do that. They die. They lead a life of regret. And what have they left behind? Well, they they've left behind certainly a story for us to look at and say, I'm not going to lead that type of life, and I'm not going to live a life of regret.
Yeah. I really hear what you've shared is like the access out of that is what you've done with us today is sharing your story, sharing, your just how you've turned your trauma, your tragedy into this gift for us and for, people that need to hear what you have to say, and what you gave that other firefighter who was dealing with a similar situation. I see that you're giving this gift, continually, and I'm just it's moving just that you are at a place where you can look back and see all of that and create it for others in a way that we wouldn't have access to if you didn't share. So I just really grateful for you to share with us your story and just the beautiful life that you've created, and just giving and serving others, and in giving, empowering others and just contributing to others, and it's just really inspiring. So thank you so much, Rick. I really we definitely would love to have you back to share some more stories with us in the future.
Well, thank you, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
I did
Well,
too. Thank you, Rick.
we enjoyed having you. It's a real honor and pleasure to have you with us, Rick. And yeah, again, like your whole story is just like it. You've you've created a process in your life. You created a process that you're sharing with how to turn all that hurt, all that loss and fear into something beautiful. And I think we all can learn from that. And your vulnerable, beautiful sharing of it. So thank you again, Rick.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right. Until next time, Rick. Aloha.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you so much, Rick. And thank you all for tuning in with us. I'm going to take a real quick opportunity and just a reminder that you're invited to speak on this stage. I know wherever you've been, wherever you live, whatever's happened to you, you have something unique that can empower and lift others up. No matter what you've been through, what's happened, you have something that somebody else needs to hear. Like you have something that somebody else needs to hear. So I want to invite you to be on this stage. And the link on the bottom of the screen, you can sign up to be a guest. We would love to have you share what you've discovered in your life, what wisdom you've discovered over the other side of your trauma. And this is a gift that keeps on giving. We're 122 episodes, and literally every single one, we've learned something. We've had an amazing story of overcoming the most fearful, scary, occasions in these guests' lives, but they found courage. They found something on the other side of that wasn't apparent until they had the courage to go through that journey. And I know you might be in a similar place, or you might have overcome, or you might be dealing with something. We want to invite you to just share who you are and the gift that you are. And we have a book that we're actually going to be launching this year. It's called Together We Rise, and we are looking for authors, co-authors, people who are leaders in their community, creative leaders, spiritual leaders. We're seeking you to share your stories that light up the world. And the link, I'll put the link at the bottom of the screen here. If you go to onedayIsToday.us/together we rise, you'll see how you can partner with us and be a part of this amazing movement and really share your story on a platform that touches people and makes an impact in their lives to empower them to overcome what they're dealing with and what they're facing. And I also want to just share, like, this is what our mission here at One Day is bringing you and me in communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity in our diversity to create a better world for us all. And this is all part of our vision. Our vision is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique gifts, genius, and contributions are being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. That's why we're here, and that's why we invite you to join us. This is a movement that we rise together, and we want to celebrate with you, and we want to celebrate you. So we will see you all next episode. I love you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe, be well, and as always, one day is today. Peace, everybody.